"Your legacy systems are holding us back," Martin Hayes heard coldly as he sat across from the new CEO, Ethan Clark. The termination papers slid slowly across the polished mahogany table, sealing an 18-year journey Martin never expected to end this way. Martin, 47, had been the senior software architect at Evergreen Solutions in Seattle, the man who built their entire core platform from scratch. Countless nights fueled by coffee and sheer determination. From a startup of 6 in a tiny warehouse to a respected tech name, his code was the backbone of the company. Ethan, barely 40, with his tailored suits and polished buzzwords about modernizing and streamlining operations, had been at Evergreen for just 3 months. Yet, he never bothered to ask Martin how the system really worked. Martin nodded without argument when handed the dismissal, understanding that loyalty and years of sacrifice didn't matter anymore. He packed his desk quietly, passing familiar faces who looked on in disbelief. Driving home through the Seattle rain, Martin's mind was calm but resolute. He pulled out a long, kept folder proving he owned the core algorithm powering Evergreen's platform. Created and copyrighted on his own time, long before employment began. While others chased quarterly numbers and flashy consultants, Martin knew the true value of his work and the storm that was about to hit the company without him. Martin Hayes didn't just build Evergreen Solutions software, he lived it. From those early days working shoulder to shoulder with the founder, Harold Mason, Martin had been the silent engine powering the company's growth. Harold, a passionate visionary, lacked the technical know-how, so Martin's expertise filled every gap, from crafting scalable algorithms to debugging late-night server crashes. The warehouse startup grew into a respected company, thanks largely to Martin's tireless commitment. But it came at a personal cost. He missed his daughter Emma's first steps, countless baseball games, and family dinners. His wife, Laura, often reminded him gently that he was married to Evergreen more than to her. Yet, Martin stayed loyal, turning down more lucrative offers, believing in the promise Harold had made loyalty would be rewarded when the company succeeded. Then, everything changed. Harold suffered a heart attack 3 years ago, stepping back to let his son Tyler take the reins. Tyler had an MBA and a sharp eye for numbers, but little understanding of Evergreen's soul. His focus was clear: prepping for acquisition, maximizing short-term profits, and trimming costs. The culture shifted. Innovation gave way to quarterly metrics, and Martin's warnings in executive meetings were met with polite nods and, "We'll circle back on that." Martin had suspected the storm for months. When private equity bought Evergreen last year, they brought in Ethan Clark as CEO, a man whose style screamed disruption, but who never once asked Martin how the systems worked or valued his 18 years of institutional knowledge. Ethan canceled the annual developer retreat, reorganized teams without consultation, and scoffed at Martin's old school approach. The consultants he brought from San Francisco couldn't grasp the complex architecture Martin had built, and they proceeded to dismantle it piece by piece. Yet Martin kept his head down. He updated his copyright registrations, safeguarded his personal code repositories, and prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. He knew the original algorithm powering Evergreen was his intellectual property, licensed, not sold, giving him leverage the new management hadn't anticipated. 3 days after the cold dismissal, Martin was fixing a fence in his backyard when his phone buzzed relentlessly. Calls and messages from former colleagues poured in. Systems were failing, clients were nervous, and chaos was setting in. The consultants had bungled the core algorithm, and the company was hemorrhaging contracts. Martin finished his fence, put away the hammer, and spent the evening with his family, temporarily turning off the storm brewing in his professional life. But deep down, he knew his story was far from over. The next morning, Ethan's emails flooded in. Urgent offers for consulting at exorbitant rates, desperate attempts to patch the damage he helped create. Martin declined politely. His lawyer confirmed what he already knew. The licensing agreement protected him, and Evergreen's legal threats had no teeth. Meanwhile, the system failures worsened. Clients pulled away. The stock price plunged. Former team members whispered about sabotage and loyalty. Martin stayed silent, watching as the house of cards collapsed. Then, an unexpected ally emerged: Harold Mason, Evergreen's founder, now retired but still watching. He reached out with a plan, a buyback clause buried in the original sale contract that could turn the tide. With new partners and Martin's leadership, the plan was to reclaim Evergreen, restore its technology, and rebuild the culture that once made it great. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but Martin finally understood. This was about more than just a job. It was about saving a legacy. As Martin prepared for what lay ahead, he found a strange mix of emotions swirling within him. Frustration, disappointment, but also a quiet resolve. The company he'd poured his life into was unraveling under leadership that barely understood the foundations he had built. He recalled the early days with Harold, and the small team working endless hours to craft that first working prototype. Back then, the mission was clear: build something meaningful, reliable, and scalable. Now the company's future seemed uncertain. Ethan's leadership, backed by private equity's cold calculus, was focused on cutting costs and hitting short-term targets, not nurturing innovation. Martin had watched from the sidelines as key engineers were laid off, replaced by consultants who struggled to grasp the nuances of the system. The code that Martin had meticulously developed was being altered without his knowledge, triggering cascading failures across client platforms. Yet, Martin wasn't one to panic. Instead, he quietly rallied the remaining engineers, those loyal to the vision they had shared for nearly 2 decades. They met in after-hour sessions at his home, poring over every line of code, identifying where the consultant's changes had broken functionality, and brainstorming how to stabilize the systems. They weren't just fighting to save the company. They were fighting for their livelihoods and the trust of clients who depended on Evergreen's technology. Meanwhile, the legal battle was looming. Martin's licensing agreement gave him unique leverage. He had retained ownership of the core algorithm, licensing it to Evergreen on the condition that it remained intact and unaltered without his consent. This wasn't just a technicality. It was his shield against being steamrolled by corporate interests that saw him as expendable. Martin's wife, Laura, was a pillar of support. She reminded him that this fight wasn't just about code or contracts. It was about reclaiming control of a legacy that he deserved. Together, they mapped out the next steps. He needed to build a new company, one that honored the principles they had lost: quality, integrity, and respect for the people who made the technology possible. Then came a call from Harold. Though retired, the founder hadn't abandoned the company or its people. He shared inside information. A hidden clause in the acquisition contract allowed him to buy back Evergreen's core technology if it became non-functional for more than 10 consecutive days. The timeline was ticking, and the recent system failures had brought them perilously close to that trigger. Harold also introduced Martin to Elaine Winters, CTO of Meridian Systems, a respected firm interested in partnering with them to rebuild. With Meridian's backing, Martin could secure the resources and expertise needed to reclaim the technology and restore client confidence. The plan was bold but necessary. Martin and his team prepared a formal notice exercising the buyback clause, backed by documented evidence of system failures and broken contractual obligations by the new management. The move sent shockwaves through the industry. Evergreen's stock plummeted, and the board scrambled to salvage the situation. In the days that followed, Martin's legal team negotiated fiercely, pushing for a clean break and the right to rebuild Evergreen with Meridian's support. The new owners realized that without Martin and his team, the company's core asset was a hollow shell. Finally, on the eve of the deadline, the board conceded. The buyback was approved, and Martin was poised to take back the reins of the company he helped create. It was not just a victory over corporate greed. It was a restoration of trust, respect, and vision. As Martin prepared to step back into Evergreen's offices, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This time, it wasn't about sacrifice or loyalty under false pretenses. It was about ownership of his work, his team, and the future they would build together. The journey ahead would be challenging, but Martin was ready to lead Evergreen into a new era, one that honored the past but embraced the possibilities of the future. The acquisition had initially seemed like a promising chapter for Evergreen Technologies. Investors saw the company as a valuable asset with potential to scale rapidly under new management. But Martin saw the early warning signs. The culture he had helped build was rapidly eroding. His trusted colleagues were being dismissed, replaced by outsiders unfamiliar with the complexities of the software and the needs of their clients. Martin's concerns went beyond mere layoffs. Critical development projects were abruptly halted. Maintenance schedules were ignored, and system updates were rolled out without adequate testing. More alarming, the core algorithm he had painstakingly created was being tampered with, undermining the reliability that clients had come to depend on. Yet Martin kept his head down, focusing on what he could control. He meticulously documented every change, every failed update, and every complaint from clients. His technical knowledge was unmatched, but so was his understanding of the company's responsibility to its customers. He knew that the software wasn't just code. It was the backbone of hospitals, supply chains, and government agencies who relied on Evergreen's solutions daily. Despite the pressure, Martin continued to support his team. They were disheartened but not defeated. In late-night meetings, they dissected the failed code changes, identifying the consultants' missteps. They built patches to stabilize critical systems and communicated openly with clients to manage expectations. Still, Martin realized that internal resistance was not enough. The new CEO, Julian Keene, was committed to his vision, one that prioritized short-term cost savings over long-term stability. Julian canceled Evergreen's annual development retreat, dissolved the original engineering teams, and replaced experienced staff with consultants lacking institutional knowledge. Martin's wife, Laura, was his anchor during these turbulent times. She reminded him that his fight wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. The countless nights he had sacrificed, the missed family moments, the relentless pursuit of excellence, all these were at stake. She urged him to prepare for whatever came next, emphasizing that sometimes the best defense was a well-prepared plan. One afternoon, Martin reviewed his licensing agreements and intellectual property documentation. To his surprise and relief, the core algorithm, which powered Evergreen's platform, was legally his own creation. He had licensed it to the company, but the ownership had never been transferred. This critical detail meant he held a powerful position. The software could not be legally altered or used without his explicit consent. Then came the system failures. Within days of his termination, Evergreen's clients began reporting crashes and performance issues. The consultants struggled to keep systems online. Panic set in among major customers. Martin received calls from former colleagues desperate for guidance. The situation confirmed his suspicions without his leadership and intimate understanding of the technology. Evergreen was unraveling. Martin declined the new CEO's offer to return as a paid consultant, knowing it was too little too late. Instead, he contacted Harold Voss, Evergreen's founder, who had retired but remained invested in the company's legacy. Harold confirmed what Martin suspected. A clause in the acquisition agreement allowed the original owners to buy back Evergreen if the core systems failed for more than 10 consecutive days. With this option in hand, Martin and Harold began plotting their comeback. They reached out to Elaine Winters, CTO of Meridian Systems, who expressed interest in partnering to rebuild Evergreen on a foundation of trust, innovation, and respect for its clients. Together, they mobilized a plan to exercise the buyback clause. As Evergreen's troubles mounted, the board panicked. System outages became public knowledge, and clients threatened to terminate contracts. The company's stock plummeted. Martin and his team prepared legal notices and rallied support from loyal former employees. They weren't seeking revenge, they sought restoration, to reclaim the company's mission and integrity. In the final days before the buyback deadline, intense negotiations ensued. The board, faced with the risk of losing Evergreen entirely, conceded. The buyback was approved, and Martin was poised to lead the company once more, this time with a renewed commitment to its people and technology. Walking back into Evergreen's office, Martin felt a profound sense of purpose. He wasn't just returning to a job, he was reclaiming a legacy, one built on years of sacrifice, innovation, and unwavering dedication. This time, he vowed, Evergreen would rise stronger, guided by those who truly understood what made it great. After weeks of mounting frustration, the inevitable happened. Martin's position was officially terminated. The news wasn't unexpected, but it hit harder than he thought. Packing up his personal belongings from his cluttered office, he caught the wary looks from colleagues who still hoped things might turn around. But the new CEO's vision was clear: legacy systems were relics, and Martin's expertise was outdated. Despite the sting, Martin maintained his composure. He knew his value wasn't defined by one man's short-sightedness. Instead of dwelling on the loss, he focused on what he still controlled, the core algorithm he had developed painstakingly over 18 years. Years of late nights, missed birthdays, and endless cups of coffee had gone into that code. And crucially, that algorithm was still legally his intellectual property, licensed but never sold. That realization sparked a plan. Martin gathered his closest team members, a handful of seasoned engineers who had been marginalized or let go alongside him. They shared stories of dismissed warnings, scrapped innovations, and half-baked fixes imposed by the new consultants. It was clear Evergreen Technologies was unraveling under new management's hands. At Martin's home, these late-night brainstorming sessions became their battleground. They dissected the flawed modernization efforts, pinpointed where system integrity had been compromised, and drafted a blueprint for a new company. One that would build on Evergreen's strengths without the corporate short-sightedness suffocating it now. Meanwhile, Evergreen's clients were growing restless. Systems began crashing, contracts were threatened. Martin's former colleagues reached out in desperation, seeking guidance to stabilize the chaos. The irony wasn't lost on him. The company that had cast him aside was now desperately calling for the expertise they had rejected. A surprising ally came in the form of Harold Voss, Evergreen's founder. Though retired, Harold remained deeply invested in the company's legacy. He informed Martin of a little-known buyback clause in the acquisition contract. If Evergreen's core systems failed for more than 10 days consecutively, the original owners could repurchase the company at a predetermined price. With that legal ace up his sleeve, Martin and Harold rallied support. They also teamed up with Elaine Winters, CTO of Meridian Systems, who offered strategic backing and resources. Together they laid the groundwork to reclaim Evergreen, aiming not just to restore the company, but to reinvent it with integrity and respect for its people. As Evergreen's troubles mounted publicly, clients backing out, system outages making headlines, and stock prices tumbling, the board panicked. Desperate to avoid losing control, they scrambled to fix the chaos but lacked the institutional knowledge to succeed. The buyback deadline approached like a storm on the horizon. Martin's new company, Pinnacle Dynamics, prepared to take the reins, with a commitment to transparency, innovation, and restoring trust. Walking back into Evergreen's offices under new ownership, Martin felt a deep mix of vindication and humility. This wasn't about revenge, it was about setting things right. For the employees, the clients, and for the years of dedication that had built the company from the ground up. As he addressed the team for the first time, Martin emphasized that this was a new chapter. One where experience was valued, voices were heard, and technology served the people, not just quarterly profits. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be skeptics, challenges, and tough decisions. But Martin knew one thing for sure. Sometimes getting pushed out isn't the end. It's the push needed to rise higher. As the chaos at Evergreen Technologies spiraled, Martin's resolve only grew stronger. The company's failures were no longer whispers in the hallway. They were full-blown crises splashed across industry news and financial reports. Clients who once trusted Evergreen's systems were now threatening to walk, and with good reason. Outages and system crashes had become disturbingly frequent, with no clear fix in sight. Despite the turmoil, Martin's new venture, Pinnacle Dynamics, was quietly gaining momentum. The team had poured endless hours into building a platform that addressed the very gaps Evergreen's new leadership had ignored. They designed solutions that not only matched but surpassed the legacy systems, all while staying legally and ethically sound by respecting intellectual property boundaries. The pivotal moment came when Harold Voss, Evergreen's original founder, reached out with crucial information. Harold revealed a rarely invoked buyback clause in the acquisition agreement. If Evergreen's core technology failed for more than 10 consecutive days, the original owners had the right to repurchase the company at a predetermined price. It was an unexpected lifeline that could change everything. With this knowledge, Martin and Harold began rallying support from loyal clients and key industry players. Elaine Winters, a respected CTO from Meridian Systems, offered to back their efforts with strategic partnerships and resources. Together, they formed a plan not just to reclaim Evergreen, but to restore it to its former glory. One built on trust, innovation, and respect for the people behind the technology. Meanwhile, Evergreen's management found themselves cornered. The board was in a frenzy, desperately trying to patch the sinking ship. Julian Keene, the CEO who had fired Martin, scrambled to contain the fallout, but without the institutional knowledge or the right people, their efforts were little more than band-aids on a gaping wound. As the buyback deadline loomed, the pressure intensified. Pinnacle Dynamics accelerated development and readied to step in with a solution that could rescue the clients and stabilize the technology. The industry watched closely, sensing a potential shift that could reshape the market. When the day finally came, Martin returned to Evergreen's offices, but this time as a partner and leader of a renewed vision. His address to the staff was heartfelt. He spoke of redemption, teamwork, and the importance of valuing human expertise over fleeting corporate trends. He assured them that this wasn't just a business transaction, it was a revival of a community and a commitment to doing things right. The transformation wasn't instantaneous. There were hurdles, skeptics, and tough decisions ahead. But the team was united, their loyalty fueled by the knowledge that this time, their voices mattered. The new Evergreen was more than a company. It was a symbol of resilience and the enduring power of integrity and technology. Martin's journey had come full circle. What began as a painful dismissal had evolved into an opportunity to lead with wisdom, to rebuild on solid ground, and to prove that sometimes, the biggest setbacks carry the seeds of the greatest comebacks. With the official buyback completed, Martin Mercer stepped back into the familiar halls of Evergreen Technologies. But it wasn't a return to the past. It was a fresh start. The office buzzed with cautious optimism. Old faces mingled with new hires brought in to reinforce the company's renewed commitment to excellence. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of relief and determination. For years, Evergreen had lost its way under corporate short-sightedness, but now, under Martin's leadership, things were about to change. Martin understood that fixing a broken company went far beyond patching up technical systems. The scars ran deep, from strained employee morale to shaken client trust. He made it his mission to rebuild both. Transparency became the new mantra. Weekly town halls replaced stiff boardroom meetings, where employees could voice concerns and contribute ideas without fear. This openness rekindled a spirit that had been all but extinguished. One of Martin's first major initiatives was the launch of Integrasphere, the next-generation platform that combined the core strengths of Evergreen's original software with cutting-edge innovations developed by Pinnacle Dynamics. At the Seattle Convention Center, surrounded by clients, industry experts, and press, Martin unveiled Integrasphere. It was more than just a product, it was a statement, a promise to clients that Evergreen was not only back but better than ever. He emphasized the human element behind the technology. Our team, many of whom have been with us for over a decade, built this together, Martin told the packed room. We've restructured the company so they have an ownership stake, because their commitment deserves nothing less. The applause was genuine and heartfelt, a testament to the deep connections Martin had fostered over his years with the company. Not everyone welcomed the turnaround warmly, though. Julian Keene, the former CEO who had ushered in the chaos, quietly observed the launch from a competitor's seat in the back row. His expression betrayed the discomfort of a man witnessing what he had nearly destroyed now rising from the ashes. By the end of the day, news spread fast. Evergreen's stock rebounded, while Julian's new employer took a hit. Beyond technology and finances, Martin also prioritized the company's culture. He and his leadership team instituted an employee ownership program, ensuring workers had a real stake in Evergreen's success. Morale soared as staff felt valued and empowered for the first time in years. Training programs were revamped, safety and quality standards tightened, and internal communication channels flourished. The transformation had its challenges. Integrating legacy systems with new technology required patience and precision. Client migration needed to be seamless to avoid disruptions, and competitors eagerly watched, ready to capitalize on any misstep. But Martin's steady hand and deep knowledge of the company's DNA proved invaluable. On quieter days, Martin would sit by Lake Washington, reflecting on the journey. From the caffeine-fueled nights coding in a cramped warehouse to the turmoil of being dismissed, and now to the responsibility of guiding Evergreen forward. It was a full-circle moment. He thought about the sacrifices, missed family dinners, the stress, the moments when giving up seemed easier. But through it all, the belief that his work mattered never wavered. Looking ahead, Martin envisioned a company that wasn't just about profits but about legacy. One that nurtured innovation while honoring the people who made it possible. Some things you can't own alone, he'd say to his team, and some things you shouldn't. This company belongs to all of us. As the months passed, Evergreen Technologies continued its steady climb from the brink of collapse to a beacon of innovation and integrity. Martin Mercer's leadership transformed not only the company's technology but also its soul. The team he once led through uncertain days now thrived with purpose and pride. Clients returned, Impressed by the renewed dedication and quality of service, Martin found balance. Evenings spent with his family, weekends fishing by Lake Washington, and workdays fueled by passion rather than obligation. Looking back, Martin knew that the trials weren't just professional setbacks. They were life lessons. He learned that loyalty is not blind obedience but standing firm for what truly matters. Ownership isn't just legal papers or contracts, but the responsibility and care we bring to our work and relationships. And sometimes, getting pushed out of the place you've built is not the end. It's the beginning of something better. True success isn't just about holding on to what you've built. It's about having the courage to rebuild, to rise above betrayal and setbacks with grace, vision, and integrity. When you stand by your values and invest in people, not just profits, you create something lasting and meaningful. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below sharing a time you faced a tough challenge and came out stronger. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell, because here we celebrate stories of resilience, wisdom, and quiet victories. Let's grow stronger together!